Welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast, your North Star for mastering endurance training and holistic health. Join us each week as renowned sports scientist and founder of Athletica.ai, Paul Laursen, along with athlete, coach, and sports scientist Marjaana Rakai, and coach and cyclist Paul Warloski, guide you through the maze of often confusing training principles. Make sure your compass is ready. Class is now in session. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Athlete's Compass, where we navigate training, fitness, and health for everyday athletes. This week we are answering a listener question, and it's a serious question. Can our bodies experience too much stress in extreme exercise like Ironmans or ultras or long gravel races? Is this stress temporary or long-term damage something we should be concerned with? And so here's the question from Athletica athlete Janice Campbell from Canada. She asks this: I'd love to hear a discussion about the short-term detrimental effects of extreme endurance events on the body and the time frame for recovery. What happens during an endurance event like an Ironman that sets an athlete back? I speculate that it could be rhabdomyolysis or destruction of the mitochondria organelles. I love that she's making some guesses. So what are some of the effects of doing these kind of long-term or long distance and long time kind of events?
What do you think, Marjaana?
Well, I could list a few short-term effects that I know of,
Okay.
which are GI issues, especially I find that especially during the running, or if you're doing triathlon at the last leg, which is always the running, we often experience some trouble, and often it is nutritional, based on what you've been eating and how much sugar you've put in, because it's hard for your digestive system to tolerate all that sugar that you're asking it to digest. We could have problems like hypernatremia, which is when your blood sodium levels get out of whack. Oftentimes it's because we drink too much water or that we lose a lot of sweat. Another one is heatstroke or hyperthermia if you're doing like something cold, like my bucket list item, Norseman. I've tried to get in twice, but haven't got in yet. So maybe next year. And then muscle damage. We all know we all know the soreness in our muscles, inflammation, and we're gonna get into this a little bit deeper. We're gonna bring in Prof and his Ironman recovery study. But this is what Janice is talking about, the muscle damage. And when we destroy our muscles enough, like cause those microtears that we do during a long runs or Ironman, we can have myoglobin, which usually is in the muscles. We can have that present in our blood. When myoglobin breaks down into substances that can damage the kidney cells and lead to rhabdomyolysis. Another one is central nervous system fatigue, and that's the feeling of trash that I've been talking about, like feeling garbage. And I think this could be a really, really important point to recognize in yourself, like when you're done your long ultra runs or Ironman, any ultra event. How do you feel after, immediately after, and a few days after? Because oftentimes you feel that nervous system fatigued, and maybe similarly when you're going through a stressful period of your life and you keep training. So I can pinpoint when I've pushed it too far, because my central nervous system feels fatigued and I feel trashed. Same way, like after an Ironman, just similar kind of feeling. And then Janice brings up the mitochondria, which are organelles found in most cells in our body. And those are the powerhouses in our cells where the biochemical process turns food into energy. And it's to me, it seems likely what Janice is saying, that those get they either the ones that are already old and less functional get destroyed, and new ones are being built. But I'm sure our Professor Laursen can help shed the light in that area as well.
For sure. Hey, Marjaana, you did an awesome job on going through all the various different stressors that we all experience when we do these extreme events. That was really good. And yeah, really don't have too much more to add. Just to maybe simply that they everything is a stress. And when you do an Ironman or an ultra bike or an ultra swim or whatever your bucket list item is, that day is going to be stressful for you. And you know when you're going out there and you're going to do it, that's what it's all about, right? Because this is the exciting thing that we're there to do. This is what we've prepared for. That's why we try to, that's why we do a big build in terms of our chronic training load that we try to build up on. Let's use Athletica as the example, right? Any training thing that we're training program that we're trying to do, and then we rest and recover, and then we have this big moment of stress. And you can actually even see that on the performance profile on Athletica as well, right? Like you can actually see the predicted stress. It's going to be huge right on that day. So yeah, to Janice's point, you're going to have all of that. Now, it just so happens, as you alluded to, Marjaana, that I was interested in this exact same question that Janice had. And I did a big study with my colleagues at Edith County University. It was when I was over there, and I was the guinea pig. And we did all these various different tests on myself before, during, and after the event. If anyone here has been following the Coaching Professor newsletter, you'll have seen me write about some of these the things that happen in these. This is a lot of the this is the studies where I'm talking about myself becoming hyponatremic. So I'm drinking too much water and have basically a dilution of my blood sodium level. And that's, again, a dangerous thing. I'm becoming hyperthermic. I talk about that as well. My core temperature is way up there. But of course, also, and what's apparent in this study by first author Ken Nasaka is that I get a lot of muscle damage. And that's, we'll link into this study, but this was actually we're looking at the time course of the recovery. So imagine you're starting before the event, you're starting with a baseline. Let's just talk about the muscle damage. You start before this, we're talking at, low level of the two markers of proteins. One's creatine kinase, and the other one is, as Marjaana alluded to, myoglobin. And you can see, basically before you start, everything's all attached and whatnot in the body. These levels are almost nothing, right? And then you do the race, and at the end, they've gone up like 1,000% or more. And that is actually because you created these microtears in the muscle, and these enzymes, like creatine kinase, like myoglobin, they've leached out into your bloodstream. Now, as Janice mentioned, rhabdomyolysis, I guess it's potentially a problem situation where your kidney has to handle this, all these proteins, and it's a problem because it can actually cause kidney damage. So, these are when we see people in the medical tents and whatnot. This might be one of the issues that they're struggling with. It's very, very rare, I will say, for these individuals to go from the medical tent and then move into to a hospital sort of setting, but it has occurred. So it is something to be wary of. But again, if we go back to the study, what I showed was that I recovered, generally speaking, these markers of myoglobin and creatine kinase got lower and lower in the hours and days following, such that by day 2 they were half. The markers were about half what they were post race. Again, post race they were both up over 1,000%, and then they're down to about half after 2 days, and they were down half again after 3 days, half again after 4 days, and pretty much back to normal within 8 days of the race in terms of those enzyme markers. And so, yeah, that was probably, that is, and you think about the soreness that you have, right? Like that's probably follows the time course of that soreness as you recover from an event like an Ironman where there's a lot of running that's involved. So, yeah, and I don't know if we want to, any thoughts on what I've said there, Marjaana?
What did you do like immediately after, like, just knowing what you went through during the Ironman, and especially the run portion? What did you do immediately after? Like, what were your recovery methods? Because obviously you were in pretty rough shape. You were close to heat stroke, yeah.
Yeah, so I had again, we've got the data here, so we actually know. I'm not just saying this. We've got I'd swallowed a core temperature pill, so I knew exactly. I had a 41 degree core temperature, and so I was like a heat stroke sort of thing. And this was about halfway. It was a bit got to about the half marathon phase, and really was sort of walking the rest. And then I developed, again, probably too much drinking. So this is a 35 degree Ironman Western Australia event. And again, I was of the belief prior that water was my only friend, and I just had to drink and drink and drink. And I overdrank. And then, so coupled with the high temperature, the over drinking, possibly some hormonal issues are also occurring in there. Some water retention hormones, specifically antidiuretic hormone, gets pushed by your brain and causes you to hold on to a lot more water. So all this is kind of going on. I do finish the race. I think this was my worst race ever. I was 11:38, I think. Long walk basically, and then I got to the end, and then I was on, which probably I should not have done, but then I got onto an IV drip because of my state. And you think about it, so here I am in a hyponatremic situation. Hyponatremic means low blood sodium. So now I'm putting more water into an already dilute sodium compartment. Again, we're oblivious to all these problems, right? So I'm probably, and again, we have the data to show that in the recovery phase, in the 2 and 4 hour period following, my hyponatremia got worse, and I got into clinical hyponatremia, which was 130 milli equivalents per liter, which is not good. But anyways, so that was sort of the state that I got in that first initial period. Recovery food was pizza, as is often what we're doing. So I was just basically, but this is the other interesting thing. And anyone that's had done an Ironman and maybe had this recovery period after, I wake up in the middle of the night just raging, have to go pee, which is a great thing because it means my kidney is all of a sudden kicked in finally. And it's clearing the water that it needs to. But yeah, I remember that. And then that's actually, I wasn't often you're not hungry right after these events. So I wasn't hungry actually. I think I had one piece of pizza, and then I went to bed. But yeah, I woke up at, whatever it was, 1 or 2 in the morning, and then, a lot of big urine urination, and then eating pizza like crazy kind of thing. So that's that was the recovery mode. And yeah, that's that was that race. And then you just on that time course. Actually, I think there's I just want to keep going to a few. This study was quite something in terms of the tests that we did before. And I know, Paul and Marjaana, you guys were commenting on some of the tests that I had to do, right? So I'm doing like VO2 max tests, and like running cycling efficiency, running economy. These are hard tests to sort of do. And then I can actually remember like having to do some of these tests in the post recovery period, and they weren't easy to do. Because of the muscle damage that you've got, right? Like the last thing you feel like doing is running doing these VO2 max tests. But you see, go ahead, Marjaana.
And I'm looking at I have the study here, and I'm looking at, you have the run test 48 hours after the event, and then 72 hours after you had the cycle test to exhaustion. Like,
wow.
I want to know how you got yourself through mentally, like from that grueling Ironman. And obviously nobody sleeps after an Ironman. Your body is just such a mess. And oftentimes we're not hungry. So we're not kicking in that, the recovery and, rest and digest. We are way up here. But I cannot imagine doing any running 2 days after or any test to exhaustion 3 days after. I'm just mind blown the level of commitment to research.
This is just what I've dedicated my life to, right? That's why I just really enjoy it. I mean, the data is really cool. I can remember some of these. I'm looking at the vertical jump height. So imagine again, also the last thing you want to do is a vertical jump test, right? And what do you think? What do you think you probably saw? Of course, the vertical jump is very, very low after the race, right? But it was fun trying to do these sorts of things. We see, after, it was interesting. Actually, I'm actually able to vertical jump, not too bad after 48 hours, which was pretty cool.
Wasn't your heart rate depressed, and wouldn't that have made the VO2 max test really hard to even do in the first place?
Oh, totally. But we see my cycling VO2 max come down in 72 hours post by 500 milliliters, half a liter basically. It's down. And to Janice's thoughts around the damaged mitochondria, maybe that's one factor that's kind of kicking in. Who really knows? I think that the other one Marjaana mentioned around central depression. So and this is easily seen in something as simple as grip strength. So grip strength, I think everyone can kind of imagine, is those little hand dynamometers that you squeeze, right? And we can actually measure how many kilograms of force are actually creating there. So and we can see even just post 2 hours post the race, I can't squeeze that grip thing. It's down maybe or at least 20% post, and it stays down 12 hours, comes back a little bit 24 hours, almost comes back 48 hours. Almost 48 hours. There's good recovery in a lot of these variables. The running economy, that one definitely stayed suppressed. So basically I was running on a treadmill, I think at 12 kilometers an hour. That was just standard. I remember how hard that was. And now we see the opposite in that one. So my VO2 is actually really high. So it's I'm no longer efficient at running. And I really have to breathe. I remember breathing so heavy as well to try to run at 12 kilometers an hour. It's interesting how the body still tries to adapt to accomplish any of these tasks that you ask it to do if you're motivated. But it's certainly, with all of these things, we feel, we don't feel like we did, we don't feel fresh like we did in the beginning of this.
Well, what's remarkable about your study and about most of the time when people do these extreme events is that even though you were getting tested as much as you were in addition to the recovery, you still mostly recovered in 8 days. And most people who do these kind of events recover fairly well within a week. And most of the research papers that I read prior to this episode, it looked as though the majority of the detrimental effects that Janice asks about and that you were talking about, Paul, Marjaana, is that they are temporary, a couple days to a week. But some papers, there are some books that are coming out about some of the more long-term negative effects of this intense exercise. What are there some long-term effects? What do we know about it? And let's start there.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is where we need to, ask yourself as well, Paul, because you've got some heart stuff as well, and I've seen this in a lot of different athletes too, right? Like especially in the in the triathlon program, worked with the New Zealand Olympic triathlon program, and there were a number of athletes that actually had various different AFib kind of issues, and just irregular heartbeats and these sorts of things. Another sad example is my friend Laurent Vidal, the late Laurent Vidal, who sadly passed in his sleep from a heart abnormality, and hard to actually know what it was. But we were so Laurent is an Olympic. He was fifth in London Olympics.
Well,
Coach and husband of Andrea Hewitt, famous triathlete. And Laurent would actually there's some really scary footage actually of Laurent in the middle of an ITU running race. He's at about 3 or 4 kilometers of a high intensity 10K run in an ITU event, and he literally falls over. You can see him like racing with the right up there at the front, and then he literally falls right over and hits the fence. So and this is just and in speaking to him, it's just like all of a sudden the lights go out, and he's right at VO2 max and then gone. So something about that high intensity was not sitting with him. He retired, turned to a coach, but then again, sadly, in his sleep, just his heart just stopped. So there are these rare occurrences of, but they are very, very rare. So there may be some long-term damage, but again, how do we actually know that it's actually the exercise that's causing this versus whether this would just happen into as it does to everyday people? I'm wondering, what are your thoughts, Marjaana and Paul, on the long-term effects?
Yeah, I have now heart problems that I never had before, and whether they're related to 40 years of riding a bike and running, I have no idea, and the doctors don't know either. And there's some excuse me, there's some family history of mild heart issues, but nothing like what I had. And one of the points to be made is yes, the head and ablation, and yes, things were fixed, and yes, there may be a risk for some kind of other ventricular kind of event, but at what cost? I mean, does that mean that I sit at home and eat ice cream and not ride my bike and enjoy life? I don't think so. I think there's that health. I mean, yes, I get a little nervous getting my heart rate up now. And it's like, is this going to cause a problem? That's not what caused the problem before. It was just anytime I rode my bike or anytime I was at home, I would have an AFib event or a ventricular event. But there's that balance, it's like, living healthy, living well, and having a condition. But is there, I guess the question is there enough evidence that, there may be some long-term damage, there may be some long-term negative health effects, but are these limited to going exceptionally hard? Are they limited to extreme endurance events? I mean, what do we know, if anything?
Well, again, I reflect a little bit on Phil Maftone's work in Hit Science, where he says that, again, Phil's known for the low intensity stuff and, his math training, right? L2 training, zone 2 training. And, but, and again, he's, if you know Phil, he's coached Mark Allen, and he says that, do you think Mark Allen did not do any sort of high intensity interval training before, he won 6 Kona events? Of course he did. So the key is you need to be healthy to be able to accept that type of stress. And again, this is what we've gone into in depth in our former podcasts, right? So when we are healthy and a little bit young, that helps too, right? Like there's a great adaptation that occurs in the young, healthy athlete for that high intensity stuff. But I think if we add potentially the unhealthy athlete plus the high intensity work, and I would put myself in that category. Probably, I was not. I was mentioning I was probably eating a little bit too much pizza. I think I might have mentioned in a former podcast or that I was drinking a 2 liter of Coke a day, and because I thought that I could, and and that carbs were king, and I think that's probably contributed to some of my challenges in the Marjaana mentioned inflammation, right? So when you're taking in all of that sugar during that event, that's why you feel so crap at the end of the day often. It's because you've got all of this, they're called ROS, or reactive oxygen species, free radicals going off the chart, big inflammation, big inflammatory state. You're just kind of a mess, right? And again, long-term impact of that plus high intensity work. And we've got the unhealthy athlete that we spoke of previous. And that could certainly probably did contribute to my joint inflammation. And that could potentially even impact things like your heart problems. I don't think we know.
No.
But again, to your point, Paul, yeah, are we gonna not move our bodies, especially as we age? No, I think there's something to be said for quality of life. So even if there is those potential risks, I'm personally going to take them, always appreciating my own context and try to do it as healthy as I can.
We know that exercise, is good for our hearts. Like it makes our hearts bigger and stronger. And eventually, like after decades of endurance training, I don't actually know exactly how long it takes to, see those structural changes in our hearts. But I think also we need to think about overall life style factors, like again the stress and the nutrition and how that all, like you said, Paul, plays into it. But overall, of course, exercise is positive.
I mean, we got to get our regular dose. At least I know I do. I know how, and this is almost more for my mental health than any sort of physical health. Like I just feel so much better mentally. The clarity of my life is so much better if I'm moving my body on a regular basis in a logical kind of fashion. So
totally. But do we know anything about like long-term hormonal effects of ultra endurance races or events or training?
Well, I know we've got some great we've got some amazing ultra endurance athletes on Athletica. I think of Phil, for example, and he's on the forum, very active, And he does these large randonneur. There's like 24-hour plus events, right? Like so, and he's, I know in listening to him and some of his words, he loves to be out there just moving his body, loves his time on his bike, loves getting away from technology. And and again, I completely relate, having done things like that with team race across America. And there's just something to be said about these long hours on the bike. And I don't, if they're bad, then so be it. But I just kind of can't see how they're too bad for us to be outdoors, breathing fresh air, exercising, burning fat, breathing oxygen. All these things are what humans were meant to do. So, and more or less, there's pretty solid evidence that people that have an active, healthy life are living longer than those that aren't. So yeah, overall, it's probably a pretty positive thing. Like with anything, as soon as you're born, there's risks.
Yeah.
How, and I may end up answering my own question here, but how would I know that something permanent or long-term is happening with my health due to my training and racing versus something that's short-term? And I say that I may be answering my own question because I definitely noticed, some definite irregular heart activity going on that I ignored for a while because, I'm a dude and I ignore these things. And until it got to the point where I started getting dropped on group rides that, there was no reason for me to be getting dropped, and I just had nothing in the tank. And I said, something's going on here. So at that point, I realized, yes, there's something long-term or more significant happening, but are there other things that we can be looking for that listeners could get a sense like, if this is happening, if these kind of things are happening, or is it just something out of the ordinary, something abnormal happening?
Yeah, I think it's probably just like you said, Paul. Like there's you need to be aware of these things that are happening, and you need to kind of put two and two together, right? You need to connect it. You need to connect the dots. And when if you're getting dropped and it doesn't make sense that you're getting dropped, then it's time to go and check things out. If there's a pain in your body somewhere and it isn't going away like it used to, you kind of have to wake up and and again, I'm reflecting on my hip pain, right? It's like I'm following Dan Plews around in my training, and that hip pain just wasn't going away all of a sudden like it used to in the past. So I think it's just a dose of common sense, and certainly with some of the tools we've talked about with monitoring your heart rate, your pace, your power, heart rate variability, but listen, like the feel and the listen that we always emphasize in on the podcast and in Athletic Guide these are really, really key items as well.
My takeaways are it's an interesting topic that we had that I feel actually a lot better after this conversation than I did going into this conversation, because number one, I realized that there are always going to be short-term effects from doing some kind of extreme endurance event. It's the reality. And those are short-term effects almost always. Number two, if you prepare as much as possible for all eventualities, if you are wise in your preparation, if you've got a good program, if you are not drinking 2 liters of Coke, if you are doing the kind of things to prepare for an event, you're going to be ready for an event as best you can. But number three, there may be some long-term effects of training and racing at these levels. But if you apply some common sense and if you pay attention to anything that's weird that's going on with your body, pains or aches or your heart coming out of your chest, then those are pretty good signs that you should get things checked out. That is all for this week. Thanks for listening. Join us next week when we dig into how we can really monitor our training progress. For Marjaana Rakai, Dr. Paul Laursen, I am Paul Warloski, and this has been the Athlete's Compass podcast. Thanks. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athlete's Compass podcast, your guiding light through the complex world of training for your endurance sport. For a deeper dive into the science, listen to our companion podcast, the Training Science Podcast, and check out the AI adaptive training platform, Athletica.ai. Thanks.